Last week, Denny Carter explained the mainstream media was not telling you about Elijah Moore, so he talked about Elijah Moore on Friday, and shout out, obviously, huge game for Moore. So credit to our friend Denny Carter.
You want to show the sound?
Do we have sound?
Nope.
I think we did. I didn't think we did.
No.
I sort of paid attention.
I was hoping you were going to, though, just to make Pete, be in a tough spot again. It's a good running theme.
I wasn't going to do that to backup producer Pete.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Connor Rogers, Matthew Berry, Lawrence Jackson in the house on Wednesday. Got you good yesterday.
Yeah, you did. Well done. Well played.
Had a trick up my sleeve.
Sure.
That one.
Those are the kind of hijinks that happen all the time on Badlands.
That's right.
But every once in a while, you caught me here. We have to think of our revenge for worse lands.
I mean, you got the Tommy DeVito
I've been thinking
news
since last week.
Yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, Tommy DeVito makes this a lot easier for us. I can tell you that. Yeah,
New Jersey
him
subscribership through the roof
definitely.
right now.
Through the roof.
Yeah.
Something to
Through
think
the
about.
roof. I did have one person reach out on social media and tell me they would listen to Worse Lands.
Yeah.
So we appreciate
There
that.
you go. It starts
You got one.
I
That's
got
all you
one.
need.
One.
Starts.
Now it's gonna spiral.
I'm gonna exactly. I'm gonna hire the slot merchants as the house band for Worse Lands. I'm building this.
Your
podcast.
staff is better than ours.
Yeah, from within.
I'm impressed. I'm a little nervous already. All right, well,
For
we got a
sure.
lot to do today. It's start-sit day. We'll debate Tony Pollard, DeVonta Smith during Keep It Open or Close It Out here at the Happy Hour Bar. We'll talk 49ers wide receivers. And, of course, on Wednesdays, we go early line alert. I know Lawrence has got a money line long shot. He's cooking up after.
When does he not?
He hit on his last week.
I know he did.
Yeah,
I
big
know
one.
he did.
How about them Colts?
How about
See if he goes back to the well.
Let's see what we do.
Let's jump into Keep It Open or Close It Out, our version of start-sit here at the Happy Hour Bar. Jameis Winston tops the list here. This is Jameis over his last 3 starts right here, guys. And listen, this is a big week because it's a short week for the Browns against a division rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers. We got to hear from Jameis on just what that game now means to him with the Browns.
Ever since I became a Brown, I've learned that I don't become a Brown until we beat the Steelers. So we have to turn this thing around quick. That's a great team in Pittsburgh. I have so much respect for Coach Mike Tomlin and what they're doing year in and year out. So we have to be prepared, and we just got to show up.
There you go. You don't become a Brown until you beat the Steelers. Are all the members of the Browns hoping to beat the Steelers? Or if you're just like, hey, if we lose the Steelers, then I'm not officially a Brown and I can continue my career elsewhere? I can get out?
It's good thinking.
I'm just saying.
You're ahead on that one.
I know Jameis like being a Brown, so I think he want to pull off the upset here.
Yeah, well, he's the best quarterback. At the Browns, he's their best quarterback. Other places that he's been, he hasn't always been the first option.
That line's only 3.5 points. Short week, anything could happen?
Anything can happen as well. With Jameis, it's the full Jameis experience,
Never,
right?
yeah.
There's literally nothing that can happen on Thursday night where I'll be like, well, that came out of nowhere. Jameis could throw for 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, and be like, okay, yeah, Jameis. Jameis had one of those days. Jameis could also throw for 60 yards and have 5 interceptions, and I'd be like, yep, that's Jameis.
Not with 60 yards. I think
he still gets 300.
I think with the 4 or 5 interceptions, he's gonna give you 300 yards.
I mean, who knows?
But the 5 interceptions.
My point is that an extremely wide range of outcomes, Lawrence, for Jameis Winston, who last week was nothing short of spectacular. He was on the love list last week. He was somebody that I did my shot for shot where I said on Fantasy Football pregame, I said 300 yards and 2 touchdowns for Jameis Winston as a return to New Orleans. He comes up almost 400 yards. He does throw the 2 touchdowns as well. Things were looking good for Elijah Moore, for David Njoku, for Jerry Jeudy, everyone but Club Said. But hopefully Club Said gets open this Thursday night. Having said all that, and we are a pro Jameis table here at the Happy Hour, I'm closing it out on Jameis Winston. Look, he's merely my quarterback 18 this week, Connor. There's a lot of concerns here. Steelers have allowed 11.5 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks this season. That's second fewest. Like, we've seen them, like, they shut down Lamar Jackson. They shut down Jaden Daniels. Big
name quarterbacks.
The big name quarterbacks that have had a ton of success going into Pittsburgh, and then all of a sudden, didn't happen for him as well. The game is in Cleveland. That's one positive here, but not any quarterback, literally no quarterback this year has gotten to 17 fantasy points against the Steelers only 2 have scored even 15 fantasy points against Pittsburgh. They've allowed multiple touchdown passes in only 2 games this entire season as well. He's my quarterback 18, Lawrence, in a game in which Cleveland has the 2nd lowest implied team total on the Week 12 slate.
2nd implied team total. The total
2nd lowest,
the game total for this game is 36.5, and that game is supposed to have some weather in it too. So that just makes it iffy for even both sides of the past game, to be honest. You talked about them, the Steelers shutting down Lamar and Jaden Daniels to this extent too. Lamar Jackson was quarterback 23 in Week 11. His worst finish of the week so far had been quarterback 12 with a bunch of quarterback 8 finishes in there.
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, QB 24. These are 2 top 7 fantasy quarterbacks we're talking about. So if they're doing that to them, I have a hard time trotting out there Jameis Winston, who, like you said, played good last week, but he doesn't have the rushing upside. We talked about the low game total. I'm gonna close it. This week as well. Maybe the week after that we'll come back to you, but not this week, Jameis. Not this week, dog.
Him bucking this trend of great, obviously Lamar, Jaden having bad finishes. Like, this would be all time, Jameis. Bad weather, short week.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah.
The season's over. I know they're playing hard. I don't want to go against that.
Yeah,
but
they're giving it a shot.
The season's over.
It's not
mathematically.
Funny enough, though, I think they can win the game.
I agree.
I agree.
3.5 line is for a reason.
Oh, this is a trap game for the Steelers. If you're looking at this from Pittsburgh's point of view, we took care of this. We took care of the Ravens. We took care of the Commanders. That was a big hyped game. This is a trap game.
Still a tough place to play. Like, the Browns fans show up even when that team doesn't win any games.
Oh, for sure. And if there's wind, and that stadium's always tough to play on. You've got a short week. Russell Wilson has gotten lucky. Like, he's made a couple of great plays, but there's also been some luck involved. And every once in a while, the bounces have all gone Pittsburgh's way the last couple of weeks.
They didn't score a touchdown against the Ravens. They didn't score an offensive touchdown against the Ravens defense.
Right, and by the way, and to that point, everyone says, oh, the Steelers, they beat the Ravens. Okay, great, 100% great win. But they beat the Ravens in a game in which Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals.
Thank you.
And the Ravens didn't get a 2-point conversion. The Ravens get that 2-point conversion at the end of the game. It's 18-18, and who knows what happened. You're going to overtime. The Steelers won. Credit to them. A win is a win is a win.
Definitely.
But, by the skin of their skin teeth.
Derrick Henry fumble for the first time in 500 carries.
Derrick Henry fumble.
Credit to them.
Two Tucker
that
field goal
the interception
misses.
that Justice Hill caught and then got it. So it's a weird game.
It's very AFC North game.
That is how the Ravens lose every game.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, long way of saying I agree with you. I think this is a trap game for the Steelers.
Yeah,
Browns absolutely have a shot. Looking forward to seeing that tomorrow night.
13-10 kind of finish.
Probably.
Incoming.
Yeah, take the under.
Al Michaels furious on the broadcast.
Al Michael. Oh, it's another game.
I can't wait. I'm locked in. We'll talk more about that game tomorrow.
The only disappointing of the game, if there was one thing that I wish that Amazon had on those Thursday night games, is I wish Amazon had terrible, wacky sitcoms or, a bad reality shows that Al would have to read, when he's all miserable, the promos, you know what I mean?
Because after the game,
after the game, stay tuned because Kristen Chenoweth tries her hand at taming a lion and Circus with the Stars, whatever.
Right.
Just some
And they come back to the booth and it's just silence for about 15 seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, just right. Have dinosaurs come back to life? It's an all-new La Brea.
It makes you feel awkward through the TV screen.
It's just these terrible shows are just that the poor announcers have to try to sell, and Al, who doesn't want to be there to begin with, is just trying to. I wish Amazon had some terrible shows like the rest of us companies do.
Our next guy, Tony Pollard, he's got the Texans here, Lawrence.
3 jackholes talk about fantasy football on Happy Hour every day on Peacock.
They can do that for Sunday Night Football.
Right, there you go.
No, they don't
do that for Sunday Night Football. It'd be great. Can you imagine if Tirico had to do that? Poor Tirico had to be
He could throw that one aside. We wouldn't even be mad.
Exactly, yeah. A bunch of morons sit in a fake bar and talk about fake football. It's Happy Hour every single day on Peacock.
Tony Pollard here, Lawrence. Listen, we talked about yesterday our first bye-mageddon. A lot of great running backs in fantasy on the bye week here where you're going to have to start some players that normally wouldn't make the cut. Tony Pollard, though, the volume's gone down. Tajay Spears in concussion protocol. this feels like a real toss-up for him.
It is a toss-up, especially when you got a guy who's finished outside the top 20 running backs in 4 out of his last 5 games. That's including 2 finishes outside the top 30. Hasn't scored a touchdown since week 6. Oh, by the way, just a couple of weeks ago, this Detroit Lions team, this Texans team was playing the Lions, and they held Jahmyr Gibbs to under 4 yards a carry, David Montgomery under 3 yards a carry. Even with Tyjae Spears out, because Tyjae Spears just came back.
Yeah.
He had a lot of these games. If I got guys like Bucky Irvin, maybe Rashad White, Tyrone Tracy there, even Ramondre Stevenson, I'm probably looking to close it out. Close, because he's still the running back 1 in Tennessee regardless. I think knowing, like, if Tyjae Spears don't play, I'll probably keep it open, but if he does, I would close it out.
I'm going to keep it open. I get it. I just think it's with 6 teams on a bye, I just don't think he can be that choosy. He's my running back 23. There are reasons for concern, Lawrence. I totally get it. Like, he's had 3 games with fewer than 18 touches, and he's averaged 7 fantasy points per game. Titans have the 3rd lowest implied team total in this game as well. So there's reasons for concern, especially if Tyjae Spears clears the concussion protocol and is active in this game. But he left last week. He's currently in the concussion protocol. So there's a chance that he does not suit up for this game. And if he does, then, in the games in which he sees at least 18 touches, Tony Pollard's averaging 16 fantasy points per game. You'd think he would get 18 touches against the Texans, which is not a super scary run defense. They're, it's not great about middle of the pack. They're 13th. Yeah. They're 13th over the last month. The Texans are in terms of run defense. And the other thing that at least keeps Tony Pollard's, fantasy light on, you can, that you hope for flex production here, is that he's had a double-digit target share in every game this season. The offense has seemed to be a little bit more productive under Will Levis since he came back. Yeah, they're moving the ball a little bit more, and so I have Pollard at 23. I think he's a low-end running back 2, mid-tier flex in a 12-team league. Again, given that there are 6 teams on a bye, I understand Lawrence's concern. I don't disagree with it necessarily, but I'm reluctantly keeping it open on Tony Pollard because I just don't think we got better options, and he should get at least some work in the passing game.
Our other running back here, Matthew, Austin Ekeler. He's been a really good check down option for the rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. He's had 3 straight games at 17-plus points. The problem is some of that's been without Brian Robinson. Can you continue to play him with Brian Robinson healthy now? Yeah,
and so I'm going to close it out on Austin Ekeler, who I love, as you know. Proud Fantasy Life investor, Austin Ekeler. But to your point, 2 of the last 3 games in which he scored at least 17 fantasy points, to your point, Connor, Brian Robinson wasn't there. He should be back. Brian Robinson, we saw him against Philadelphia, so we know Brian Robinson is going to play against the Cowboys this week. The other thing is that the Commanders are 10.5-point favorites in this week. We're probably not going to have to throw much in a home game. We've had 10 days to prepare for a Cowboys team that's traveling on a short week to Washington. By the way, in games in which Brian Robinson is active, Austin Ekeler averages under 8 touches per game. So it's just not a big workload when you've got Brian Robinson healthy, especially in a game in which you're double-digit favorites.
Yeah,
Closing it out.
That 8 touches a game is kind of scary, but we're going to flip-flop on this one because I'm gonna reluctantly keep it open on Ekeler. This is why. I believe that short passing game to the running back is part of their running game, an extension of it. I think when Brian Robinson came back last week versus the Eagles, they played basically the same amount of snaps. Brian Robinson 53%, Ekeler 52%. Now that could be Brian Robinson getting back into the swing of things, but the Commanders was leading that game against the Eagles for much of that game into the 4th quarter, and Ekeler was able to get the 8 receptions for 89 yards. So I think versus the Cowboys, until they build that big lead, which I expect them to do that. I very much expect them to do that. I figured, he could get 4 or 5 catches in there. You see what he does with it. Dallas does allow 43 receiving yards per game to the running back. That's the 6th most in the NFL. So if you see where a defense is weak, you attack that. So I think he could have some value there. So not expecting another top 12 running back week like he had in PPR, but I would just leave it just slightly open. I would actually feel better about him than Tony Pollard, to be honest.
Tony Pollard versus Austin Ekeler this week? Little bet?
Yeah, I think this might be our first bet of the season.
All right.
We had a lot of Riddler
dinner?
bets, Desmond Ritter bets
that's true.
that you
I think
forced
you still,
me into.
I think you still owe me dinner. I think you still owe me a number of dinners.
Yeah, maybe.
For
maybe
Desmond
but
Ritter
we'll
bets. That's fine.
We'll go
double or
Ekeler.
nothing.
Yeah, double or nothing.
We'll
there you
go
go.
Ekeler
Yeah,
versus
you
Pollard.
have to buy me 2 dinners. Okay. Real quickly, just as long as we're talking Cowboys Commanders, Pro Football Talk just tweeting, Cowboys designated Brandon Cooks to return from IR. I'm bringing this up just so you can ignore it. Brandon Cooks was bad before he got injured. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be playing this week. He's just been designated to a return from IR. Cooper Rush and or Trey Lance under center. You want no part of this passing game if it's not CeeDee Lamb and maybe Jake Ferguson. We don't even know if Ferguson's going to play this week.
Jonathan Mingo erasure over here.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, like.
You're sleeping.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just
2 targets last week.
I'm merely bringing it up just to dismiss
he
it.
did have
Somebody
it.
will.
I remember him having one.
Because he's a
One
big enough
was
name
kind
that
of
people will
throwaway.
ask.
Yeah.
So feel free to ignore Brandon Cooks just as you have for much of the year.
Well, let's get to the wide receivers that are a little more interesting then. Jakobi Meyers, brutal matchup against this really good Broncos defense, Lawrence. Yeah. They're allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season for a Raiders offense that they've really struggled throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, they've struggled. They'll continue to struggle, but they'll continue to, struggle to keep up in this game too with the Broncos. And I see them having to throw more. So it's weird. Like Jakobi Meyers on the season, he's averaging 7.5 targets per game, 5.5 receptions, and 57 yards per game, right? So I think that's just kind of, if you heard those numbers and you matched them up with Jakobi Meyers, you'd be like, yeah, that's Jakobi Meyers. I'll leave it open because those are the numbers that I think he get. I think that's the floor of what he'll be able to get versus this team in Denver, a game that they'll have to be throwing against this team.
Points,
I'm keeping it open as well. I get the question, right? Last week, kind of a quiet game, 4 for 28 on 6 targets in the first game in which Scott Turner was the offense coordinator. So you're kind of in a game in which, they were trailing and you're sort of like, it was all Brock Bowers. And so you're sort of like, man, new offensive coordinator, is it just maybe Scott Turner doesn't like Jakobi Meyers. Maybe this is going to be a pass offense that just entirely funnels through Brock Bowers. They're playing against Denver. He's probably going to see at least some Patrick Surtain. It's worth noting that the 4 receptions that Jakobi Meyers got came from the slot last week, so they'll play him some in the slot, so he'll avoid Surtain in some of this game. I'm still keeping it open, though. First off, 6 targets is 6 targets. If you're telling me in a week in which 6 teams are on a bye, I've got a starting wide receiver who's been productive in the NFL that's going to get 6 targets, I'm in. He's my wide receiver 22 this week. By the way, first matchup with Denver earlier this year against the same team, he went 6 for 72. So, and with their run game banged up, we don't know yet the status of Madison or Zamir White. There's only so many times that Amir Abdullah can touch the ball.
Dylan Laube time.
It might be Dylan Laube time, exactly. So I'm keeping it open with Jakobi Meyers, wide receiver 22. Again, I am keeping in the back of my mind, is there a switch in offensive philosophy because of Turner calling the plays? Is there something, that we're not aware of between that they don't like Meyers as much as the previous staff? But I think it was just a game script kind of thing. And by the way, Bowers was just always open.
You almost wonder in this game, and this is weird, but it does happen once in a while, they just have Surtain travel with Bowers.
Right.
If you are the Broncos,
if I was
why
them,
wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't
I would
you?
do that.
I mean, Bowers had 16 targets last week.
16.
He tore up the Miami Dolphins.
Tore 'em up.
A good secondary.
Miami Dolphins as a team smokes them, but they couldn't do nothing with that young man there.
Yeah, I put Surtain on him.
Yeah, I would too. I haven't seen somebody tear up Miami like that since Lawrence went there for a bachelor party last year. That's the last time I saw somebody tear up Miami.
Who?
That's the last time I saw somebody tear up Miami
bachelor
like that.
party
this
Yeah,
Lawrence
exactly. I'm
Jackson?
just saying.
What bachelor party was it? Did I go to your bachelor
It wasn't in Miami. Oh, boy. I'll get you out of here. We'll move on to DeVonta Smith. DeVonta Smith's got the Rams, and his offensive...
Tore up that city is what he did.
Yeah.
Tore it up.
Never allowed back.
Never
His
allowed
version of
back.
East Lansing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's his East Lansing.
Oh, God. DeVonta Smith, Kellen Moore's offensive coordinator this week, was asked on how the receivers are handling the Eagles being so run-heavy recently. Take a listen to this.
The beauty of what we have on offense, we got a lot of really talented players, and they all deserve opportunities in these games. And so, in the past game, when you have a game like that where you have a lot of rushing attempts and not as many passing opportunities, naturally those guys aren't going to get as many touches probably as they deserve and have earned. But I think those guys, you're constantly in conversation about those opportunities eventually present themselves. Again, like we said, not every game are we going to be able to rush 40, 45 attempts. We'd love to, but there's going to come different games and different styles, and that's the beauty of the NFL, that every week's a different challenge, and there's going to come a time we're going to have to sling it around and make some plays in some critical situations, and those guys will be ready.
Yeah. Reminds me of your time in Miami, where sometimes you just have to sling it around, Lawrence. You understand what Kellen Moore was saying there.
How I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, look, DeVonta Smith comes in at wide receiver 24 for me. I get it. Disappointing game last week, just 4 for 29. He was wide receiver 54 on the week. But as you heard Kellen Moore there, you're not always going to be able to run on a team like the way they could on my Commanders. Don't get me started. Positives here about this game. I'm keeping it open on DeVonta Smith. He is my wide receiver 24 again, as you saw there. 48.5 over-under. So hopefully they're scoring on both sides of the ball. Rams are red hot. This game is in L.A. on Sunday night. It's our game on NBC and Peacock. Of course, I'm a company man. So the question is does he get the volume? And I think, again, in this week, because of the high-scoring nature of this game, I think he will get the volume. When he sees at least 6 targets this year, he's averaging 16.2 fantasy points per game. When DeVonta Smith gets looks, he has fantasy production. It's fairly simple here as well. 3 of the last 4 games, he's gotten at least 1 end zone target. When you're in the back of the end zone and you can catch with one hand, the ball comes your way more often than not. It's worth noting the Rams tied for the 4th most touchdowns allowed to opposing wide receivers. So I think there's a chance Smith gets into the end zone on this one. He's a mid-tier flex for me. I'm keeping it open on DeVonta Smith in Week 12.
When you see guys who have gotten 6 receptions for 43 yards in their last 2 games, it's hard to ignore something like that. But I completely ignore that when it comes to DeVonta Smith because I just think he's an exceptional player. Look, the Rams get out early in this game, which, by the way, Matthew, is up to 49 now. So
okay.
we going to have us some points in that game. Rams get off to a fast start, just like Kellen Moore said. Depending on how the game goes, and we know how the Rams want to play. Kyron Williams hasn't been having good games recently. They've been relying on the pass, so expect the Eagles to keep up with that. Rams, too, they're a bottom 12 pass defense. You look at their past couple of weeks, like my man Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver 17 against the Rams last week.
Yeah.
Shout out to him. Before that, Tyler Lockett was wide receiver 23, and he hasn't had many good games this year from a statistical standpoint. So I like DeVonta Smith to bounce back in this as well. We keeping it open.
Romeo Doubs, our next receiver, against the 49ers, 3 straight games with under 11 fantasy points. Lawrence Doubs was hot for a stretch after having that weird incident that he wasn't happy with his role in the offense. Now it's kind of gone back to the way things were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, we might need him to get suspended again.
Right. Yeah.
So he could take a game off, then come back and be a top 15 fantasy receiver.
I mean, that's what happened with Jay Croucher. You remember Jay was complaining about his role on the show. We gave him a couple of days off. Came back, he's been hitting bets left and right.
He really has.
He's been on fire.
Yeah.
He's been on
He
fire.
can't miss right now.
Luis Gill, 100%.
Yeah.
He's been in fuego. Sometimes it just takes him, you know what?
It takes.
Right, exactly.
And
you know what, Jay? And he's not here today because we're like, you know what, Jay, just
we almost need you to cool off. You're making me and Matthew look bad right now.
It's load management for
Yeah,
Jay.
well, he's not coming off suspension. Romeo Doubs isn't. So I'm going to keep it close. And it's weird, too, because 2 things. He's not even close. He's been leading this Packers receiving group in snap count the past two games. No other Packers receiver has been playing more than 70% of the snaps these past 2 games. The other crazy thing too is one or 2 or some combo of these 2 of 4 Packers wide receivers will do something in this game against the 49ers. We just don't know who because it doesn't matter who they use. They all see him equally. DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba combined for 17 receptions, 180 yards last week against the 49ers. So it's going to happen because you got Jordan Love back there, but we don't know who. This is why I'm closing it out on Romeo Doubs this week.
I'm closing it out as well, Lawrence. I'm right there with you. Wide receiver 39 for me. I mean, you saw it there on your screen. Like, no Packers wide receiver has a target share over 20% this year. Like, not one of them. They've got 4 good ones, which is great for the Packers and annoying for us in the world of fantasy football. Last 2 weeks, Dobbs' target share just 13%. He's got 2 games this year, 2 games where he's had more than 12 fantasy points. Like, there's always a chance he gets into the end zone. Of course, they do look for him when they get in close, but it just, like, you're just throwing darts here to figure, is this a Dontavian Wicks game? Is it Jaden Reed? Also, especially feels like recently, last couple of weeks, Christian Watson has started to emerge more as kind of that alpha, and then the other 3 are sort of looking around for scraps. Josh Jacobs is running well. The defense is playing well, so they're not getting into shootouts either. It's worth noting that San Francisco, this is not an easy matchup. Niners allow the 5th fewest yards per game to perimeter wide receivers, which is obviously where Doubs line up a lot of the time. And so, yeah, he's barely inside my top 40 this week. I'm closing it out on Romeo Doubs.
Which Packers wide receiver you have the most faith in right now? At least maybe by a floor perspective, because Watson's the easy ceiling answer, I think.
For this particular week, I would say Jaden Reed.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
That's literally for this week.
If you're going to attack the Niners, I feel like the slot
because
is
you
the
see
easier
what
way.
Jackson Smith and Jigba did. He 10 for 110.
Yeah.
So for this week, I would say Jaden Reed, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, our tight end on the list here, guys, TJ Hockenson. He's at Chicago. Had the one big game 2 weeks ago, Matthew, and the other two, he's been under 30 receiving yards.
Yeah, I've been a little bit up and down. Like, again, coming back from a major injury, the offense has been, the Vikings offense after such a hot start is sort of, I don't want to say they've completely slowed down, but they haven't been as effective. That game against Jacksonville was brutal. Just everyone as well. But I'm keeping it open. 6 teams on a bye. And, oh, by the way, he's a tight end. And he's a tight end who has been good for the majority of his career. He had one game this year with 5 targets, right? One game, that was week 10 at Jacksonville, that Jacksonville game where everything else wasn't working. And he still went 8 for 72 in that one, 15.2 fantasy points. And it's not as bad a matchup on the road at Chicago as you might think. Bears have allowed at least 12 fantasy points to a tight end in 3 of the past 5. So you see it there on your screen. Hockenson, 3rd on the team in target share after Jefferson and Jordan Addison. This is over the last 3 weeks since Hawk has come back. He's my tight end 9. I'm keeping it open for T.J. Hockenson.
There's a slight concern. You see that name below T.J. Hockenson, Josh Oliver. He's got a little less target share, but he's been playing more snaps in every game this year. With that being said, Chicago's allowing 52 yards per game to the tight end position. You mentioned the bye weeks. Just to get deeper on that, that's Evan Ingram, Dalton Kincaid, and/or Dawson Knox, Taysom Hill, Kyle Pitts, and if you start either of the Cincinnati tight ends. So running back, receiver is different, but if you're missing these guys on bye, you can't possibly be in that type of position to say, we'll sit T.J. Hockenson. I'm leaving it open.
Do you think in the offseason, this is just a question that occurred to me, do you think in the offseason, T.J. Hockenson, whoever represents T.J. Hockenson, should he call up whoever represents the Hawk Tua girl and say, it's the Hawk and Hawk show?
Collab.
It's a collab. Let's get together.
Like a series, though.
Like I'm just, like
a 4-part series.
4-part series. Maybe they solve crimes.
It's
Hawk and Hawk.
It's something to think about.
This is this kind of stuff that I think of.
It's like the very famous bit when a Mike Francesa caller said, when the San Francisco Giants are in town, do you think they get together with the New York Giants? It's the same exact thing. But in this era, you could actually make content and money out of it.
You're telling me you wouldn't tune into the first episode of Hawk and Hawk? Of course you would.
It'd be my drive time content.
I'm telling you, I wouldn't. No. But I'm only one person in America, so that's just me.
So that's fine. So they get a 99% rating share.
I think it's a large percentage. I just won't be part of it.
Yeah,
but
you know what? I don't believe you, by the way. I don't believe
you. Should believe me.
No.
If you don't believe nothing else about me,
you might
believe that.
You might tune in for the train wreck of it all.
I'll tell you what, Matthew, if that happens now from this point on, I'm going to think they stole the idea from you.
They might. Well, please credit Fantasy Football Happy Hour.
Producer credit.
I want an executive producer credit on this, on the Hawk and Hawk show.
Maybe a small stake in the ad revenue?
Yeah, a little bit, something like that. I'm going to, you know what? I know the people over that do her podcast. I'm going to call them and say, hey, what do you think?
This is a guest
Hawk
for
and
you.
Hawk, yeah.
This is the first time I've ever engaged in any convo about this, and it's because you brought it up. So there you go.
But there's anything this show does, it brings you down. That's the goal.
Now he don't pull me
Welcome
in.
to hell.
Now I suck you in. Exactly. This is how messed up I am. This is the kind of dumb stuff I think of.
All right, let's recap Matthew's keep it open or close it out rankings.
They solve mysteries. What if they have a talking pet as well? And just something to think about. Or a cool car, maybe a car that talks.
A car that talks.
Yeah.
All right.
Listen, you gotta remember.
It's a work in progress.
You gotta remember. Barry had a puppet on his show once upon a time.
I had many puppets on that show.
So
Jameis Winston's a close at QB 18 on the short week against a tough Steelers defense. Tony Pollard against the Texans. He stays open to RB 23. Really tough with the bye weeks, but Austin Ekeler is a close at RB 29 in a game where we don't think the Commanders will have to throw too much against Dallas. Jakobi Meyers against a brutal Broncos defense, and brutal, I mean they are awesome. Wide receiver 22, he stays open based on volume, and they will be chasing points in that game. DeVonta Smith, he stays open at wide receiver 24 in an expected shootout against the Rams. Romeo Doubs against the Niners. The points have just not been there over the last 3 weeks. He's closed at wide receiver 39. TJ Hockenson against the Bears. Keep it open. Top 10 play. Lawrence, what are yours?
I'm in agreement with Mr. Berry in all of these but two, except I'm going to keep it closed on Tony Pollard and open on Mr. Austin Ekeler. And me and Matthew have a bet on that one.
I cannot wait to eat for free at Applebee's thanks to Mr. Lawrence Jackson.
Let's jump into the Rotoworld Player News. For all of your player news, go to NBCSports.com, and the Jets roller coaster continues as they fire GM Joe Douglas.
Yeah, this was covered on Worstlands. I know you sort of ignored it on Badlands, but well, we mostly just talked about the fact how Badlands ignored this. Connor Rogers. But anyway, the statement from Woody Johnson reads like this. Today, I informed Joe Douglas he will no longer serve as the general manager of the New York Jets. I want to thank Joe for his commitment to the Jets over the last 6 years and wish him and his family the best moving forward. Phil Savage will be the interim general manager for the remainder of the season. We will begin the process to identify a new general manager immediately. That is a statement from the Jets owner, Woody Johnson. Connor Rogers, as the man who hosts Badlands, the second best.
The pod that won't talk about this.
The second best New York football team based podcast in the land, and somebody who does cover the Jets for SNY. I would like to leave the floor to you.
Yeah. I mean, he had 6 weeks left on his contract. It's kind of hey, why don't you just get out of here right now? Like, we'll save the heating bill in your office kind of aspect. I mean, it's been a disaster this season.
It has been a disaster this season.
And
is this deserved?
I mean, Joe Douglas, if you want to say Woody Johnson was a problem this year, Joe Douglas was a problem the previous 5 years. I mean, the Mekhi Becton pick was a miss. He didn't build it around Sam Darnold, then he had a chance to pick his quarterback in Zach Wilson. That was a miss. He had a chance to try to recover from that mistake by getting Aaron Rodgers. Unfortunately, that's been a miss. The defensive line's a disaster. They lost a lot of key pieces in the offseason. Hassan Reddick trade was a laugher with him holding out. They lose Jermaine Johnson. They have no depth behind him because they haven't drafted that depth behind him. Like, yeah, you have any GM in football would love 6 years with money, resources, multiple quarterbacks. He hired Robert Saleh, so he got to hire his coaching staff after they fired Adam Gase. Like, it stinks it didn't work out, but this was a bad tenure. Historically bad. 30-64.
30-64.
That's hard to do.
It is hard to do. Can I ask you one question, though? Just I'm playing devil's advocate, and you follow the team much closer than I do, and all jokes aside. But, I mean, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, they've made some misses, they've also had some massive hits.
For sure.
They've had some massive hits. You could argue that some of them, like, is it his fault that Reddick's holding out? Is it his fault that Becton couldn't stay healthy? Is it like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe it is. But I'm just asking you, like, because there's a number of, and again, Ron Rivera got fired too after 4 years. But I'll go back to Ron Rivera. Like, I would have loved if out of the 4 years Ron Rivera was there, we had Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. We don't have any good players from the Ron Rivera era.
I think
the
issue, and those are fair. Like, he had big hits, but I think he hit on some big-time players but never built a team. This offensive line never got right in 6 years. Yeah. Right? Like, the pass rush was really good last year. It fell off a cliff this year. And when you are responsible for hiring the coaching staff where the offensive staff was never in a good place, that's on you. There's just the pillars of the team were never right. They have some All-Pros and Pro Bowls. Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, those are going to be nice.
Because even the rookies that he didn't draft, guys like Quincy Williams, DJ Reed, those guys come over and they have some success there. So with all that being said, with the hits and the misses.
Breece Hall? Breece Hall's his?
Is he overall still a good GM, or is he a good GM? I think he has some success
I think
elsewhere?
He's a good scout, a bad GM. And this is, by the way, my life. There's just always the Jets are always lurking behind you, like the Undertaker. You really never know when that music could strike and you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Really though, to answer your question, Lawrence, I think he's a good scout that was in over his head as a GM. The contract structures were terrible. For agency, they hit on DJ Reed. They missed a lot. Carl Lawson, C.J. Uzomah, Alan Lazard. They're still paying that money.
Yeah.
All that dead money.
I don't know if Lazard's his fault, and
it is his fault. Because he missed on the quarterback and then had to go get Aaron Rodgers.
Because he brought in Aaron Rodgers, and
right,
when you bring in Rodgers, you bring in it all.
Right, you know what you're signing up for. Like, it's selling your soul almost, like, in that instance.
I mean, he may have been told by Woody Johnson, like, we want Aaron Rodgers. Go sign his best friend Aaron Lazard to try to get him to come out of the darkness retreat to come sign here.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's, so.
It's not all his fault. Right. He was one of the many layers of the larger problem. That's the best way I could put it.
I think that's completely fair. Yeah. It's certainly a kind way. Checkered. So Jets fans drinks for free.
Because they need it.
Is that what it is? Because I didn't choose this. Why did Jets fans drink for free today?
It's just been an awful year.
They just need
it's
it.
Been terrible.
They deserve it.
It's been terrible.
After everything they've been through, and another day where they're in the headlines.
Right.
Yeah,
they just want it to go away. On us. We want to go quietly into the night, and we can't. Someone else gets fired or something happens.
Was this the right move to fire Joe Douglas now? Yeah, with 6 weeks left.
Yeah, you need to get a start on this. You need to kind of open the door. Because now you can – I remember when they didn't fire Mike McCagnon, and they were searching for Joe Douglas ultimately throughout that. And I think it was a bad look to run that while the guy was still there. Get him out of the building. Don't run a GM search behind his back. Have the clean slate. Now you can pick up the phone openly and say, hey, are you interested in coming here?
Okay. Is Lawrence Jackson on the short list for the Jets general manager?
100% should be. Would change just with that talent.
I think you're in a better place here.
What's that?
I think you're in a better place here at this desk.
I believe that as well,
but
it would be a consideration. It'd be because that New York media, I ain't got nothing to say to them.
I will say this: it would really help Worstlands.
Right.
If you suddenly became the Jets general manager, Lawrence. Like, think about the publicity for Worstlands.
You'd have an exclusive every week.
The thing is, if I was a GM for the Jets, I'd still work here too. So we get all time. So Connor, you got to use your Jets, your whole Jets persona you got to put me out there as give me a shot.
We'll get the campaign going.
Right.
It would be great for you to be on Keep It Open and Close It Out. I'm going to close it out on Garrett Wilson this week, but you're the GM
I'm gonna keep
of
it
the
real.
Jets.
I'm going to keep it real with my players.
It'd be really good content for the show. Something to think about.
A fascinating offseason to see what will happen with the Jets. Never boring.
Never boring.
Never.
Always content.
Always.
It's good. It was smart of you to get into the space when you did.
I did, 1,000%. Skyrocketing up the charts here. In more there's no fantasy relevancy to this move. Like, it doesn't matter.
This offense will look a little different next year. Like, there won't be an Aaron Rodgers. You don't think there'll be a DeVonta Adams. It'll be Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. But there'll be a different quarterback and a different staff, which will be a larger conversation for us.
That's
going
to be the interesting part.
It'll be interesting, because they have Jordan Travis, who a lot of people thought highly of. He had the bad injury, obviously.
He's almost on like a medical red shirt.
Right, so
it's like him.
But I picked him up in a dynasty league. Just who knows, right?
You never know.
Like, just for next year. You never know, or 2 years from now. But do they bring in? Do they say, hey, Tyrod, you're going to be the starter this year, and we're going to see we're going to take a year. Next year's a poor quarterback class. So you know what we're going to do, and there's not going to be a great free agent. Tyrod, you man the helm for 1 year. Let Jordan Travis learn on you. Get him fully healthy. Give us a chance next year to see, could Jordan Travis be the guy?
Right.
And if he's not after next year, then in 2027, I guess, right? Yeah, you would 26, 27. You would then, all right, now we'll go to draft somebody, right?
That is definitely in the range of outcomes. Like, they could draft a quarterback, or they could definitely go that route.
Yeah, or I mean, maybe it's like a day 3 guy that's a developmental guy that maybe you see
what
if
you have,
get lucky. But
which is going to be Jordan Travis. Like, that's what they're going to look for in Jordan Travis.
That's day
so something to think about there. All right. Only other thing that
the injuries we're tracking. You got one more thing?
Oh no, you go ahead. Go ahead on the injuries we're tracking.
All right, let's take a look at the injuries we're tracking. Mike Evans working his way back after being out a couple weeks with that hamstring injury would be huge for the Bucs offense, massive for Baker Mayfield's #1 target, especially with Chris Godwin out for the year. George Kittle, he's been dealing with this hamstring injury for quite some time now and playing through it more often than not. Jake Ferguson with the concussion, and he left the game against the Texans the other night. Tajay Spears is also in concussion protocol. We don't have an update on the Raiders running backs yet, Matthew. Alexander Mattison and Zamir White could be an Amir Abdullah game.
Yeah, it's a fairly light week for injuries, thank goodness, just because we already have 6 teams on a bye. It does feel like Mike Evans is trending towards returning. Remember, he was out for so long, Buccaneers off the bye, and the thought was when he got injured, he should be back in Week 12 out of the Buccaneers bye. I sure hope he does as well. You see this tweet now from Rick Stroud, who's been covering the team for a long time at NFL Stroud. Mike Evans is at the walkthrough, but hard to know who would be practicing because it's a bonus day.
Yeah, so we'll see.
But again,
they would have put him on IR, though, you would think, if he was going to miss this week.
No Chris Godwin, obviously. He's done for the season. That's a 26% target share that's up for grabs if Evans can come back, who already gets his own high target share. No wide receiver in the NFL has more end zone targets than Mike Evans, and that's despite the fact that Evans has missed 3 games. Like, he's still tied for the NFL lead in end zone targets. Oh, by the way, the Giants allow the second highest catch rate to perimeter wide receivers, which is where Evans lines
would
up.
like to see Mike Evans get back here because Baker Mayfield has truly played his best football in his career this year. That's after a year where he played his best last year, and I still think they're live in this NFC South once they get Mike Evans back.
This Sunday night, 2 teams battle for playoff positioning when Jalen Hurts and the Eagles fly west for a clash with Matthew Stafford and the Rams. Coverage of the matchup begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. Just ahead, would you rather have Deebo Samuel or Jauan Jennings for the rest of the season? We'll answer that question and more right after this.
Yeah, I mean, that's just who he is. You give him a chance and an opportunity, man, he'll make the most of it. And he's going to fight for every yard, and he's one of the toughest guys on the field. And he inspires all of us, man, just the way he plays and the energy that he brings. And you saw that. The whole stadium fed off that after that. So love playing with him, love going to war with that guy. And we just got to continue to get better together.
Who's Eatin Good? Served by Applebee's. That was Brock Purdy on Jauan Jennings, Lawrence, who has been awesome since Brandon Ayuk's unfortunate season-ending injury. I'll ask you like this. Jauan Jennings or Deebo Samuel the rest of the year?
This is fairly easy for me to answer. I would go Jauan Jennings.
Yeah.
He's the way they're playing offense and the way, Deebo's kind of been. He's been playing his same role, but it's not as productive. You got Jauan Jennings playing strictly wide receiver. 2 straight games with 11 targets and 90 receiving yards. He's wide receiver 9 in these past 2 games since Brandon Ayuk has been gone. He's the team's leading receiver in yards despite playing 1 game less than Deebo. So for me, I think if you have Jauan Jennings on your fantasy team, you struck gold at the right time as you're heading into the fantasy playoffs, Matthew.
You just saw it there on the graphic, those of you watching on NFL on NBC YouTube or on Peacock as well. But for those of you listening to just the audio, what we did is we showed a graphic that showed Jauan Jennings and Deebo Samuel, their production over the last 2 games since Jennings returned from injury. In those 2 games, Jennings, 22 targets to 13 for Deebo. 17 receptions for Jennings compared with this 9 for Deebo. 184 yards compared with 84 yards. Jennings has a touchdown. Deebo does have 13 rushing yards, but seriously, Jauan Jennings in 2 games since he returned from injury, a 35.5% target share, just 21% for Deebo Samuel, 20.7 fantasy points for Jennings, 9.4 for Deebo Samuel, literally doubling him up in almost every category, and there's also a risk of injury. It seems weird when I say, Jennings just returned from injury, but it just feels like over the course of their career, Deebo gets more banged up than Jauan Jennings. The return of Chris McCaffrey means to me that we'll see less Deebo rushing, obviously, especially because they got production from Jordan Mason. So it feels like on those rushing plays where they want to take McCaffrey out because they just want to give him a breather, that they have Jordan Mason. It's not always going to be something, kind of goofy with Deebo Samuel as well. So as great as Deebo Samuel is, 2-time guest of the Happy Hour, friend of the podcast, we love Deebo. We are a pro-Deebo show. But yeah, give me Jauan Jennings the rest of the way. He's my wide receiver 18 this week as well. And it's a nice matchup this week against the Packers, right? He's had at least 7 targets in 3 games, and in those 3 games, he's averaging 16 fantasy points. When Jauan Jennings gets looks, and obviously he's going to with no Brandon Ayuk, he's 6th among wide receivers in fantasy points per touch. Like, just again, if you can get the ball in Jauan Jennings' hands, good things are going to happen. Kyle Shanahan is not dumb. 6 among wide receivers in fantasy points per target. Doesn't even have to touch the ball. Just fantasy points per target. Anyway, big Jauan Jennings fan. We talked about this a long time ago where we said, hey, maybe pick up Jauan Jennings with Brandon Ayuk when he was out. Like, hey, coming back and just Jauan Jennings has been terrific. I feel like we've talked about him all year.
Yeah, it's not new either.
This is not new.
We saw in week 3 when Super Bowl.
Right.
We saw week 3 when Deebo was out. Mm-hmm. Jennings had the big games, rose up to the occasion, 3 touchdowns. So it's not new for him. He's not new to this team. He's not a new target. It's kind of his time. I think this last final stretch of the season got a chance to make himself some money, and I think he's doing that.
Our next one, guys, this would make for some kind of great trivia question one day. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, wide receiver 10 last week. And a lot of this, Matthew, is he's been a touchdown machine compared to his targets this year.
It's been, when you think about it, there's something about 3-name wide receivers. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine.
Donovan Peoples-Jones.
The GOAT. Exactly. There's just something about
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah. He doesn't really qualify because he's actually good.
Right.
It's crazy, though.
But it is, these 3-name wide receivers. Here's the positives. So here's the positives of Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. In the 4 games since DeAndre Hopkins was traded, he's got a 93% route participation. He's out there. He's going. Having said that, 42% of his points this year have come from touchdowns. He's got 5 touchdowns on just 15 receptions. 1 out of every 3 balls that he's catching is going for a score. That is unsustainable. That is the definition of unsustainable, Lawrence,
that's
as well.
Right there.
He has 1 game this year. He has 1 game this year with more than 3 receptions. It's a fun story. We like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but I can't recommend starting him in any given week. I just wanted to bring him up because we've gotten some questions about him because he has been productive the last couple of weeks, but I didn't rank him this week.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb, Zay Flowers, and George Pickens all have at least 45 receptions, 725 yards, but less touchdowns than Westbrook-Ikhine.
Yeah, so it's crazy.
You know,
it's just,
putting up the Madden numbers out there for us.
He's going to get it's like MVS, honestly. Like, they're going to take like 1 or 2 shots, and then maybe he scores. But it's just so unlikely for this, again, 15 receptions, 5 touchdowns. It's like,
I mean, Will Levis however long Will Levis plays in the NFL, 10, 15 years, whatever, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine just got the longest pass that Will Levis will ever have in the NFL.
That'll never be
so
stopped.
there you go.
Our next one here, guys, and last one, Javonte Williams against the Raiders. We thought it was an Audric Estime week. It was actually a Javonte Williams week. Sean Payton continues to drive us crazy here, Lawrence. Javonte Williams was RB11, which begs the question, can you start any Denver running back this week against the Raiders?
Hell no. Nah, man. Because we was talking on Sunday football pregame about Audric Estime, about starting him because he had the 14 carries. It was like, all right, maybe he'll at least be the lead of this committee. Well, no, he took a step back, and Sean Payton is basically telling us, like, yeah, we got this guy, but then, Javonte, he's young too, and then they still got Jaleel McLaughlin. So, no, I can't start a Broncos running back when they're literally telling us they have to find a way to get all 3 of these running backs, none of which are elite-type talents. They're trying to get them all the ball, so I can't start any of these guys with confidence, even though you probably have to.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can start Javonte Williams, just no confidence. Because, it is what it is, right? I mean, it's 6 teams on a bye. If there's something to hang your hat on, like the last time he played Las Vegas, he had over 100 yards from scrimmage. He's had at least a 12% target share in 7 of the past 9 games, and I bring up the target share and his usage in the passing game because the Raiders allowed the highest catch rate to opposing running backs. And so Williams, who's coming off the good game, maybe there was something Peyton didn't like, and so he gave Estime some work 2 weeks ago to sort of teach him a lesson. I mean, that touchdown run that Javonte Williams had where half the team basically pushed him 6 yards into the end zone, but it was an impressive play, right? And it just sort of showed the grit. Again, it is a little playing with fire because you are going to see multiple running backs from Sean Payton. I have him at running back 24, but given the matchup and the fact that there's 6 teams on a bye, I'm going to start him this week. Reluctantly, nervously, certainly not confidently, but I am going to start him.
Notre Dame
Can't be mad at that.
Notre Dame continues to march towards the college football playoff, and this Saturday night they take on Army at Yankee Stadium. NBC and Peacock will lead you up to kickoff starting at 7 p.m.
Army's good this year.
Eastern. Army's really good this year.
It's like, damn. Okay, Army, I see you.
A little game here.
Yeah, we do.
One more break, then early line alert for Week 12. Find out what we're betting after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook.
The crown! It is yours!
Definitely
yours. Please use promo code Barry, B-E-R-R-Y. I'm begging you.
Yeah, we need to keep the lights on here in the studio specifically. Early line alert for last call. Listen, guys, we're going to take a little look back at what we did last week.
All right.
So I was going to go with your Jets on the alt line versus the Colts, but now I'm switching it. I'm going with the Colts now.
Wow.
They're starting Anthony Richardson.
It's going to be a true test. Philadelphia is 3.5-point favorites against my Commanders on Thursday night. I think that's too much. Give me the Commanders plus 3.5.
Guys, I'm going Browns money line. They're underdogs against the Saints. Money line's only -105. Nothing crazy here.
Yeah, so great. We went 1 for 2 last week. I'm glad we played that back.
But the point is, we're 8-4 over the last 4 weeks in this segment.
I know.
So we had a bad week.
We just showed you two of the 4 losses. But yeah.
Right.
But we're due. We're 8-4. We're red hot overall.
Now it's time to buy back in. Because bigger picture, we're really good.
And we're gonna go 3-0 today.
We are indeed.
Get us started.
We're gonna get you started because I'm going back to the Colts.
Of course you are.
Oh yeah. I like them to cover. I like them to win. Damn it.
What?
I like them to win. I like the matchups. I like how this Colts D-line been getting after it. A lot of people see the Lions and them beating up on the little hopeless Jaguars. What they not going to remember is those 5 picks he threw against the Houston Texans when he had a little pressure on them. And low-key, high-key, you could pass on this Lions team. Low-key, you could run on them like Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard, and Josh Jacobs did week 7 through 9 when they got 90 yards. So I'm going Colts money line plus 330. I'm part of that 5% that's betting on the Colts.
I'm going to take the Chiefs Chiefs minus 11 on the road to Carolina. They're angry, and I'm sorry, Bryce Young has played better, but he hasn't seen a Steve Spagnuolo defense that's angry. So, I think Chiefs blow them out. They're going to make a statement here. Give me the Chiefs minus 11.
I cooked up a good one with producer Adam over here. The Raiders team total under 17.5 against the Broncos. That Broncos defense is awesome. Get it before it moves.
All right, listen, it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. For Lawrence, Connor, and Hawk, I'm Matthew Berry. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.